This video was published by mbkpinternational.com. In this video, we're going to talk about replacing the blade position sensor on the Guillotine EC19 Pro version 2, or V2 sometimes they call it. This will also work for the Guillotine XPC 19 Pro. They're similar cutters. For this thing, we're going to have to move, to take your blade position off, you're going to have to take the back table off. And for that, you're going to have to move the paper push to about the 7-inch mark. I like is usually the best. So I'm going to move to the 7-inch mark. And that's for all the black cutters. If you have an early tan cutter, there's very few of them out there, but there are some tan cutters out there. You actually have to move the paper push all the way forward. In that case, you can just move it here all the way forward until it won't come forward anymore. I'll put it back to 7. So, but for most people, you'll just be at the 7-inch mark, and we're going to take that off. We're going to take this top crown off first, and I'll go ahead and turn off the cutter right now so we can do that. And we're going to have to take off this back shield back here. So first thing you're going to do is I've already taken them off to make this quicker, but 4 Phillips screws, one on each corner. And then you can take this off and set it down somewhere. Okay, now I'm going to take this top crown off. And there's 2 screws on each side bottom. Down here, there will be 2 right there and 2 on the other side. Once you get those, this should just lift straight up. And then you can hook this behind here if you want and unplug this, or have somebody else unplug it for you. It's this one right here. One up front, one to the right. And just take this off and lay it down somewhere out of the way, say. Okay, now we're going to take off this back table to get to the blade position sensor, and there's some about 7 screws, I think. Okay, I've already taken them off to make this quicker, and 2 up front there. And once all 7 are off, you can pull this straight back, and it will pull back a certain way until it hits a bar there. But once it does that, you can lift it up a little bit, and then pull it the rest of the way off. And then again, just take it and lay it somewhere out of the way. Okay, the blade position sensor is this right here. Make sure your cutter's unplugged. You should have unplugged it by now before you took off anything. There's the blade position sensor. It's pretty easy to remove, but what I'm going to do first is we're going to turn this cutter on and just show you how it works, because these 2 tabs here, when you go to do a cut, they go down and go back. It actually goes this way. This one will, right now this is stopped in the up position. When you do a cut, this will rotate around and will go between this sensor right here, and that's when it tells it to stop on the down. And then it will automatically reverse and come back up, and this would have came down here by then, and when it reverses and comes back up, it goes and it stops when it senses it here. So those are the 2 things that tells it to stop. So you just need, when you put this back on, you need to make sure these tabs go between this tower here, so the tabs go right through there and right through there. And you don't want to get them too far to the end. You want to get them about 3/4 the way in, maybe like something like that, where there's a little bit of space, especially on this one, because if it's too far to the end, it could possibly nick or touch one of these metal pieces here, metal prongs, and short it out. So you want to, or even if you got close, it could arc. So you want to keep it off of it a little bit. It doesn't have to be way off of it, just about like that. So we'll just show you that when we're positioning it. But for now, we're going to go ahead and do a test cut. So we're going to turn this on, and when we turn it on, this paper push is going to move all the way to the back. Just got to plug it in here, sorry. Okay, just give it a second, it'll start moving. It doesn't know where to go right now because your top crown's off, so it pauses for a second because it doesn't know what to do. So just let it go all through the back, and the sensor will sense it back there and tell it to stop. Okay, and from here we're going to do a test cut, and again, I'm going to just show you here. This thing's going to rotate around, and it's going to stop when it goes between that tower down there. And when that happens, this rotates too, and then it comes back automatically, and it stops on the way up when this hits. So now do a little bit angle there. Okay, go ahead. Okay, that tells it to stop, and that tells it to stop on the way back up. One more time. The first one tells it to stop on the way down. Tells it to stop on the way down. Tells it to stop on the way back up. Okay, and that's pretty much it. We're going to go ahead and remove this here. This bracket. In some cases, on this case here, the screw head is on this side and you can't get a screwdriver in there. Some cases they put it over there, and you could get the screwdriver in there and take it off without taking this bracket off. But right here, this is in the way. It'd be kind of hard to do. It'd probably be easier to just take the whole bracket off that's attached to this sensor. So we're just going to do that in this video. First thing you want to do is, before you move anything, just go ahead and mark this with a Sharpie. You can unplug this if you want right now. But these screws, just so you know the position of them, you can mark it with a Sharpie, go around them. I already did it a little bit, but I'm marking it again. Just so you know the position of the previous position of the bracket. And it's pretty simple. We're just going to remove this right here. And there's 2 washers behind this one. Pay attention to yours. Yours may have 2 or 1 or none. It usually has some. But anyway, I'll do that in here. And we just these usually just pry off. You usually take them off. They're stick tabs. And we're just going to take this to a workbench and replace the sensor on it. Okay, we're going to go ahead and replace it. And before you do that, just kind of look at them and make sure you don't have it upside down. You got to get it back in the same way. So sit them side by side and make sure that they're the same. With the things, the plug up the top and facing the same way, just like so. And just so you know, that's how it's going to go back on, just like this one. You can take a picture of it if you want. It might not be a bad idea to see what it looks like before, because you want to make sure you get this on the same way. And we're going to go ahead and I'm just going to hold this with my fingers if I can, and then screw it here. Do the same with the other one. Hold it with my finger. If you need to, you can hold it with a little pair of pliers. And that's basically it. Okay, we got those 2 off, the 2 spacers, and we're just gonna replace the board here. Move these screws and put it on just the way it was before. The spacers back on, and go and put them back in there. I'm just gonna hold it with my thumb like that, so I hold them both. I'm going to get these screws started and finger tight them as far as I can. Oh, I didn't drop them on the floor. Okay. Okay, I got them on now. I'm just going to tighten them up and we'll take it over to the cutter. Okay, now tighten it up. You can see there is some play in it, so you want to try to center it as good as possible. And then you can hold it with a pair of pliers on one of the screws. Oops. And tighten it down here. And the other one. That did it. And you see it's a little bit off there. It's a little bit crooked. So I'm going to just, you can usually move them a little bit and straighten it, make sure it's straight. It looks pretty straight. Okay, and then I'll check it again one last time, make sure it's tight, but we'll take it over to the cutter now. Okay, we're going to go ahead and put this back on here, and again, it's going to go there. Just kind of make sure you don't do it upside, obviously not that'd be upside down. This is going to be the right way here. And you can see it's just going to be positioned between these here and snug down. I'm going to go ahead and put these washers behind it. There's one on this side stuck to it already, so I'm just going to put one in here. Screw there. I'll get the other 2 on this one. And when I was using a pair of pliers to hold those, but I was actually able to hold it with my fingers and tighten it afterwards. Didn't even need the pliers. They didn't really turn on me, but if they turn on you, you can use pliers. But on this one, they didn't turn. I wouldn't have needed the pliers. So let's get these on there and start it. Okay, I'm just going to tighten it down. And you got your marks from where it was last, your Sharpie marks, so you can get an idea where it. And a good idea to take a picture of this before you take it off, just so you can see even when it's on its bracket. That looks pretty good now. And one thing I want to look at this is, you can see this here on this. I may have talked about this earlier, but on the edges, you don't want it. You want it going right in the center of this little tower here, but you don't want it going too far forward where it hits the end of it. So and the same when this comes, especially when this comes around, because there's some actual metal pins there. It could hit those and arc and burn that board out, short that board out. So you want to make sure this bracket, I actually think is a little bit too close at the end, so I'm going to adjust it and slide this bracket back just a little bit. Loosen them just a little bit. You know, I'm just going to slide this bracket back a little bit, like there, to give a little space between there, so it doesn't come close to hitting the end. But it does have to go between these, so it has to go at least a little bit more than halfway between it. You know, this has to be at least halfway in there, maybe a little bit further, maybe 2/3. So there is I'm gonna tighten these down real good. Nice, really nice snug tight. And we're gonna plug this back in. Make sure all your prongs are straight, so you get all 4 prongs in there, and you can stick this back on, just like so. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to do a test cut, and I'm going to watch it to make sure it goes through, and we'll have that done here. We're going to have to turn it back on again. And when he turns it on, you got to wait about 4 or 5 seconds. You'll see this kind of reset. Again, it doesn't have the hood on, so it doesn't know where to go, so there, just reset it. Okay, no, I'll tell you when to cut here, but you can look straight down here, and you can see that one's right in the middle. So this one you can't, but you can kind of get an idea of if it's going to go into the middle of the other one. It sure looks like it when you look directly above it and nice and straight. It looks like it should go right. If it doesn't, if you think it doesn't, you can actually bend these a little bit. You know, if you need to, pair of pliers. A lot of times you can just do it with your hand. You don't want to do it much, but you can do slight bends if you need to get these to go right in the center of those towers. Okay, we're just going to show you do a cut real quick. Just like so. Now I'm going to do a top, maybe do one more cut, and you can see the other going in and see how far it is from touching the end. See, there's some space there. And it's not perfect center on this other one, but it's close enough, as long as it doesn't hit anywhere, as long as there's space between everything. And again, we'll do it one more time and stop it at the bottom on a cut. Let go, and you can see there that it's pretty good. And it's far enough away from those little pins so it doesn't arc or short on them, but it's still a little bit past halfway. And that's pretty much all you need to do. You just need to make sure everything's tight, everything's put back. As far as getting this back in there, we'll go ahead and get everything ready to put this back together. Okay, before we, I want to show you something on this thing here. If you would have left this at the 7-inch mark, it would have been about right here in your way of working. So when you get yours, when the crown's off, and you got this table off, you should turn your cutter on too, and it will come back to the back here, and it will stop here. Once it does that, then you can turn the cutter back off and unplug it. So make sure the cutter is unplugged before you mess with any of this stuff, any electrical. So once this thing comes back here and stops, and it unplugs it, and it gives you room here to replace this like I did. If you wouldn't have done that, it would have just stayed here and it would have been in your way. I mean, you can leave it here if you want and work with it. You can still do it. It just makes it a little more difficult. So that's up to you how you want to do it. But to get this, we're going to have to get this back to around the 7-inch mark now to put the table back on here. So I'm going to go ahead and get the crown, and we'll do that. Okay, with the cutter off, I got the crown here, and I'm going to put it back on. And I'm just going to put it down this side here since I'm by myself. If you got someone else, you can have them plug it in. But I hook it behind there just so you can grab this hanging wire here and make sure you get all 4 prongs and plug it in straight. And now you could actually leave it like that. Let's go ahead and turn it on. Because now the paper push is going to come back to the 7-inch mark where you last had it. Okay, now that's at the 7-inch mark. We can go ahead and turn it back off. And now we can unplug this and take this crown off and put it to the side. Okay, just check all your work. Make sure the screws are tight. Make sure it's plugged in good. Make sure these are going between there like they should. And do it. You can do a test cut like we did to make sure it works right too before you put all this back together. Okay, and now we'll go ahead and put this back on. And this is just going to kind of just lay in here and start sliding it under. And see how this is up kind of here. It's going to drop down. It's going to drop down once I slide it forward far enough. It'll just drop down. And I'll show you here what it really is. It's got this support bar here, and it only allows it to go back so far before it hits down here, and it slides on that before it drops down in. Let's do it again. Let's slide it under the paper push. Try not to hit the paper push too hard at all above it, because if you hit it, you can mess up your cut angle. So just be nice and easy with that, and let it drop in. It's going under your paper push, and when you get close to the end here, you got this bracket that this needs to be on top of. So you got to kind of lift it up here and get it started on top of it, okay? And then before you go forward fully, you got to look at this here. You got this wire here. Get this wire here for this, and you got this notch cut out here, so you got to slide this over a little bit and get this behind here like that so it doesn't pinch the wire. Okay, and again, it's fully on top of this bracket back here now. It's fully on top of the bracket, this bracket right here. And now we can just slide this forward all the way. Now what you gotta do, you may have to shift it this way or one way or you look at your screw holes here. Like I don't see the screw hole in there. Go directly over it there. So I'm gonna just slide this whole table over till I see the screw hole. There it is. Just tap it on the side. Get these screw holes lined. You see that one's lined up pretty good, and that one's line them up as good as you can. And then these front ones too. You may have to look at them and make sure they're lined up. You want them lined up as best as possible before you start putting your screws in. And right now we're going to start putting the screws in. Let me get that ready. Okay, I got the 7 screws it needs to put this tail back on. And we'll start with the front up here because it's usually the hardest. And you can get a short screwdriver if you want, but you can do it with a long one too. Just make sure the holes are lined up before you put them in there. And you just got to make sure you're not doing it at an angle like that because the screwdriver is going to be at an angle. You guys kind of straighten this screw as much as possible. Like I got my screws straight, but I got my screwdriver at a little bit of an angle. And you can finagle it. And then just start, make sure it goes in. It should go in nice and easy. And just only put them in about, if it goes in hard, you're cross-threading. It should go in fairly easy. Get them all started. It can be a little tug on it, but you don't want to ever crank hard until you're tightening them down. And even then you don't want to do it hard. But just get them all started like that. You don't want any of them, tighten any of them down yet, because you may have to move the table a little bit to line up a hole. See, that one kind of start getting a little tight there. Okay, now I had to back it out and redo it. And then we'll get these 2 back ones. Again, they're not going all the way. And this one ain't quite lined up right. Again, goes directly over it. Go directly over the hole. And line that up a little better. You can move this around a little bit. Okay, I think I got it better there. So that's why you don't tighten down any of the screws until you get them all lined up. Until you get them all started. That one went easy. That one went easy. They're all going easy now. And the final one. And since this is the final, I can go ahead and snug this one tight. Start snugging them all tight. You don't want to do these super tight because they will strip. But you want to do it somewhere in between. It's a nice snug tight. And these 2 definitely you got to get because the paper push could hit them. Okay, that's all 7 of them. We got those all in, and now we'll go ahead and put on the crown and the back cover. You got the crown here. I'm going to put it on. Again, if you had another person, you can just hang it here and they can plug that in for you now. But since I'm by myself, I'm going to let this other side drop and just hook this behind there, and then you see the other side just kind of just drop down the side. But you can usually fish, sometimes it's up in there, you just got to fish it out. It's hanging there somewhere. You just need to find it. And just plug that in straight. Make sure you get all 4 prongs. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift it up and put it on properly here. And just make sure when you put it on, you don't let this go behind it here or anything. It's on each side of it. You gotta check both sides, make sure it's over it on that side and over it on this side. And again, just line up the screw holes and put your screws in. I won't do that in this video. You just put your screws in there. And you line up the screw holes on this side and put your screws in there. So the last thing left is the back cover. Okay, I got the back cover here. I'm just going to put this on. And again, you line up the holes. I'm just going to get the screws on this here. Let me get the screws here. Now these you can snug them down, but this will be a very light snug. Because this metal that this goes into, these screws, it's very thin metal, so there's really not much of any thread. It's just a very light snug, just enough to keep this thing from rattling. And also keep it in place. If you go too hard with it, it'll just strip it won't strip the screw, it'll strip the thin metal of this. And you'd have to use some self-tapping screws some larger self-tapping screws to get the screws back in. Just a little light snug on there. And that's pretty much